Hi, everyone. On today's episode, we get to hear the inspiring story of Erin Taylor, a woman who faced unimaginable challenges and turned them into advocacy for women's health. After receiving a cancer diagnosis as a teen, Erin takes us through her journey, specifically about how her diagnosis impacted her fertility and ultimately led her to a career within patient advocacy around fertility, particularly within oncology. She tells us about how she ultimately chose egg donation as the way to build her family and the resources available to those navigating those decisions today. Her resilience and passion for preventative care offer hope and practical advice for women facing health challenges. This conversation is a testament to the power of advocacy, strength, and finding support during life's toughest moments. It was an honor to speak with Erin, and I'm grateful for her voice and care in this field. I know you will enjoy this episode. Me, you, and who? Who knew it would take more than two people to have a baby? In a world where infertility is no longer a taboo topic, this podcast will take you through all of the different aspects of surrogacy and egg donation through the lens of many who walk this journey in different ways. My name is Whitney Hall, and I am a two-time surrogate, now turned surrogacy coordinator for Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions, the very agency I used when I chose to carry for two amazing families. With this podcast, it is our goal to help guide and support you as you learn about what it takes to grow a family in an alternative way, as well as hear inspiring and beautiful stories of how this path has changed lives forever. We can't wait for you to hear about just one more way happy families are created every day. Hi, Erin. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Here.
Oh my gosh, of course, of course. This is so exciting because I know you and I were chatting before we hit the record button, but I got to chit chat with Scott earlier this year, which was so fun for our Father's Day episode. So this is just so exciting to get to meet you and talk to you. Okay, so spoiler alert, Scott kind of gave us the preemptive of how you guys, got to where you are as far as building your family. But I want to hear from you, what led you to having egg donation be the way that you and Scott chose to build your family?
Yes. When I was younger, like 17, 18 years old, I had leukemia. So this was a while ago, like back in 2001. And at that time, there really weren't a lot of advancements for, being able to store eggs where they would hold up well. And I didn't have a partner at the time, so freezing embryos, wasn't an option. And so before I went through my treatment for leukemia, I did actually, store some ovarian tissue.
Okay.
Um, and then went through treatment for leukemia and had a bone marrow transplant, which basically, because of the high doses of chemotherapy, it caused premature ovarian failure.
Oh.
Um, and so I had this ovarian tissue kind of in storage. And then, fast forward, Scott and I met and we got married and then we were ready to, start thinking about a family. And, along like all of those years, I had just been kind of checking in like with my GYN and, had just a couple of updates on things around fertility. And basically what it came down to was that there was no way to confidently screen this ovarian tissue to make sure leukemia cells in it. Um,
Oh.
because the thought was like, could this tissue be reimplanted back in and then, have the eggs, come from there to be able then to do, IVF. But, really after kind of talking through it after all these years, there just really wasn't a way, to know because I had a blood cancer,
Ah.
whether there could be some of those cells in there or not. So for other people, like sometimes that's an option because they know their cancer wasn't in that location.
Okay.
But leukemia, so I was always glad we did it because, I like the feeling of knowing like we did everything we could in the moment, and then you just
Sure.
where the technology and the science goes. Um,
So, real quick, and I
mhm.
don't mean to interrupt. So, just for those who, so when I think of, I'll hear of, someone who has breast cancer, for example, and they do have those conversations of, well, let's go ahead and do an egg retrieval or thing like that. Why? And I know you mentioned that it was technology was really the big inhibitor for, not doing an egg retrieval. What help me understand the ovarian tissue? What exactly that method, the thought was behind that method?
Yeah, yeah. So back in this would have been 2001, they
Hmm.
didn't have like if they were at that time to have extracted eggs out, the freezing quality and the viability
Right.
just there. It honestly, like this freezing egg thing wasn't really something that was very successful at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so that's where then this idea at that time was let's take the tissue out and we'll freeze it. We'll have, theoretically more with the tissue and
Mm,
see at a later date what cool new things might be available to use that tissue.
sure.
Uh, and then in my situation, it just ended up not being an option where it could be used. But I have heard of other, stories where people
Yeah.
have been able to have it reimplanted and that works for them. And then I think nowadays with the freezing of eggs, being so much better, they just hold up so much better now with the techniques that they're using that
Sure.
really tends to be more of a go-to option.
Sure, sure. That makes a ton of sense. So you're 17 when a doctor is basically approaching you about this. And I mean, I know for me at 17, I was absolutely not thinking about fertility at all. What were you even, I mean, not only are you have a diagnosis, you are battling cancer, and now someone's talking to you about like future plans. How were you even like handling all of that?
Yes, yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah.
I will have to say, like my family, my mom and dad were amazing.
Mm,
It's actually my mom who brought it up and kind of asked that question about
yeah.
and I think the other thing for me that was a little lucky is that the type of leukemia that I had was not very aggressive.
Mm,
And so I had time to be able to kind of sort through and process and make some decisions about some of these things. I know some people don't have that and they're diagnosed and then just, very quickly they have to, move towards treatment.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was I think honestly at that point with the age that I was, it was just kind of a lot of my parents just kind of helping me get through these appointments and I was just kind of doing the next thing on the list and
Sure.
I'd honestly don't I definitely know at that time at 17 or 18 years old, I really hadn't wrapped my head fully around at that time what all of this was. It was
Sure.
just like we're going to do this and we're going to, see if this gives you options in the future. But that is such an interesting question because as a healthcare provider, I advocate a lot for young adults, going through cancer care. And I always tell our medical providers that this is an ongoing conversation throughout someone's journey because it's not just
Mm,
one time thing of fertility preservation. Over time, that understanding and those questions are going to develop and
yeah.
having ongoing conversation at different points in their journey is really, 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 really helpful.
Yeah, and super important. I mean, because again, so you froze the ovarian tissue. It ended not, doing what you were hoping it for it to do. And so then egg donation becomes that route. And I know when did you kind of wrap your head around like, okay, this is going to be how I'm going to build my family if I want to have a family.
Yeah, yeah. So we once we knew that we were ready to kind of build a family, we met with the fertility physicians and just kind of had that final conversation of
Right.
like we can't use your tissue that's off of the table. And then I mean I think at that point it was probably at least another year or two of us
Mhm.
kind of gearing up to do this because there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
We had to understand all the finances behind it, had to understand what agencies were and how
Mhm.
that worked, how the donation worked, then how the IVF part worked.
Sure.
For us, honestly, it was probably at least a couple years in the making of just kind of figuring out logistically how we were going to do all of these things.
Sure, sure. When did you know you were ready?
Yeah, it honestly also came down to like location and when we were settled. Scott and I met in Houston, and then for his job, we actually moved overseas to Africa for a couple of
Oh
years.
my gosh.
Had a lovely time there. It was like a great adventure. And then once we came back to the States, that's when we were like, okay, we're back, we're settled. That's really when we kind of started investigating things a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And eventually you found egg donor and surrogate solutions. And I know Scott kind of told us about, just that donor, like finding your donor and in that whole process. But for you, as you were going through it, kind of what was your perspective? I mean, it sounds like you almost had peace with it because you had kind of this long
Yes.
window of thinking about fertility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. So was very much just excited, for me that it was an option that was available.
Yeah.
I love the option that I would get to carry the babies, which just
Yeah.
also just I think was really helpful. And was just ready to build a family. And there's so many different ways to build a family. We were just really ready to get started on our journey.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So obviously it was successful. Nolan and Evelyn are here and they're beautiful. And I know you guys are in just the thick of all of the fun that is those sweet babes. But your life obviously was forever changed by that cancer diagnosis. And, like you said, you are a healthcare provider, specifically in oncology. Tell me a little bit about you know, that passion and then obviously the passion that you have when it does come to looking at fertility when it comes to cancer treatments and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, going through it, I think definitely steered me in that direction of
Yeah.
oncology. I had always been interested in science. And then just I met so many amazing physician assistants and nurse practitioners and got to learn about their job. And so that's really kind of what steered me into that career. And I was really lucky to do during school a clinical rotation at the hospital that I'm at now. And it's just like all the pieces kind of fell together. They had a job spot for me, and I've been at that same hospital ever since. So it's been a really nice fit.
Yeah.
And very early, like the first year or two that I was there, they have an advisory council
Mm.
at the hospital for patients that are, going through care or done with their care, and then employees, and then some of us who are both. And so that was just a really great group to get involved in. And just their whole goal was just to advocate for young adults, going through this journey,
Mhm.
to try to advocate that all of their needs were being met, one of which is fertility. And so, what can we do to help the patients themselves? What can we do from the employee side to make sure that these conversations are happening?
Mhm.
How can we just help everybody to give them as many resources as we can? And that I think being able for me to kind of advocate for that and share my experience, kind of share the why and the story behind it. I
Yeah.
think when I tell this to other medical providers, I think it sticks with them a little bit more.
Mm.
And then they see the outcome, and I have this great slide at the end with like a collage of all these pictures of Evie and Nolan and that
Yes.
process and all of that. And I think it's just really nice to be able to kind of tell it from beginning to
Now.
end, and advocate, for other people that this is a possibility.
Yeah. What has been kind of that evolution that you have seen as a physician's assistant, when having those conversations about specifically fertility and patient advocacy?
hmm I think providers are becoming more and more comfortable with talking about it. And
Mm.
I think it's on everybody's radar more, just because we're continuing to kind of push all of these resources out.
Yeah.
And so I think the more conversations people have, the more comfortable they are doing it, not just at that initial one, but, at a follow-up visit a year or two later, hey, you're done with your treatment, how are you guys doing? Just ways to open up and leave that door open for talking about family building if that's something that they want to discuss further.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So obviously the hope is that when someone is discussing their family building, it isn't after they have had a cancer diagnosis. Um, so, as far as I think one of the major things that you hear, especially kind of in the world of infertility, is you hear a lot about cervical cancer,
Mhm.
and just and the aftermath of that and what happens during it and before. And you are talking about just your fertility and family building and things like that. What is kind of the importance of preventative care, pre-screening? What does that even look like?
Hugely important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the guidelines have changed a little bit, over the years, but I think for a lot of women, going to our GYN appointment sometimes is like the only appointment that we see a doctor.
Yes. Oh, for sure. I am 100% guilty of that. I will see my OB ask me the last time I saw my PCP.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And like, especially when we're young, I know so many people that like, they had their like family doctor growing up,
Sure.
then they go to college and they move around and sometimes the OB is really their only, touch point in care.
Yeah.
Um and so I would just really encourage everybody, even if that is your only touch point, really, really, it's really important to keep those visits. Sometimes it's annual, sometimes it's every few years having a pap smear. So there's some different guidelines, and I think some of it depends on, prior pap smear results
Sure.
and family history, those kinds of things. But keeping that close relationship with the GYN for women's health is so important. I can't tell you how many of my friends I've known that have gone in and have had their pap and they've caught something very early.
Yes.
Are able to just do, kind of something minimal as far as treatment, and then they don't have to do anything further. And that's really when you want to get these things taken care of, is catch them early before they turn into something that requires more treatment.
Yeah, for sure. So really that pap smear is just hugely important as far
Yeah.
as just catching things early and preventative care and, and things like that. What age is there and maybe this is naive of me, but is the pap really kind of that first screen when it comes to looking for cancer, specifically cervical? What happens when there is an abnormal and you go from there?
Yes, great question. Yeah, so the pap smear is really the gold standard. We actually, look at those cells under the microscope and they can
Mhm.
tell if there's any changes there. And sometimes if they see changes, it's not actually cancer, but more of like a pre-cancer situation.
Sure.
And that is where at that point it's still kind of preventative. It's hey, we see these cells here, they're looking a little funny. Sometimes they can do some procedures to go in and just remove those cells so that they don't turn into something more.
Mhm.
um, there could then be some more close monitoring, that's done after that to keep a close eye for a number of years.
Sure.
All of those things are important. And then I think just in general for women's health, any changes in irregular bleeding, changes in menstrual cycles,
Mhm.
abdominal pain that's unexplained, all of these types of things, we should be seeing our GYN to help us figure those things out and make sure that there's not something else going on, not just with the cervix, but with the uterus or the ovaries, and just kind of comprehensively for women's health, checking everything out.
Yeah, for sure. I know what would you say are maybe some questions to ask specifically maybe to your doctor or ways really just words to kind of maybe explain what could possibly be happening. Because I know sometimes either women are embarrassed, despite the fact that we all go through this, or it's so easy. I think as a society, we kind of, I know for me, like it was like, oh, I just kind of explain away weird cramps, or, just we're just kind of expected to just quote deal with it essentially. So when it comes to advocating for yourself, what would you say, what does that look like? What are kind of those words that we would use? What would you, what tools are kind of best when you are going to that appointment?
Write things down.
Mm,
Have your notebook or your notes in your phone,
yeah,
and think about, what are these top things that you want to talk about with your provider. I love that as a medical provider when I'm seeing patients and they come in the room and we kind of go through the initial visit and just kind of general checklist of stuff.
sure.
Um, Usually a point in the visit where they say like, and what questions do you have? And I love it when patients open up the phone and we can go, one by one by one, and make sure that we've had everything addressed. The other thing too that's sometimes nice is usually there's like a nurse or a medical assistant that may ask some questions before the doctor or the provider comes in, and even sometimes giving them a heads up to say, hey, that these are my top two things, that I really want to talk about. That can also be helpful. Because I feel like a lot of times now, especially with like medical records, there's a lot of just clicking boxes and things like that.
Sure.
You chart. And so just making sure that you have that time to really have a narrative, that we're not just answering these yes or no questions, but that you're really able to tell them a narrative of kind of what's been happening, how long it's been happening for, how frequent it is, how it's impacting your life. I think those are all really important things for providers to be able to understand fully what's going on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No, that's super helpful. I think the best advice I ever heard someone say was, "Hey, you're there, you're paying for that appointment.
Mhm.
So take the time. Don't feel rushed. Like you're there. It's okay. That appointment doesn't last. It's not supposed to last just 5 minutes. Like ask those questions."
Exactly.
Yeah. What age should an individual start getting screened when it comes just, and how often should those screenings occur? I know you said it kind of varies sometimes, but when should someone start?
Yes. So I believe it is still when they begin sexual activity
Okay.
is when you start seeing a GYN. And then after that, it will just depend on the age and like prior pap smears, how often they want you to come for visits. And then just obviously if anything comes up in between those
Yeah.
visits, don't feel like you've got to wait until your next visit. If something is new or changing, reach out to them so that it can that and talk to them about it, and then they can decide, oh, is it something we can talk through over the phone, do a telehealth visit, do we need
Mhm.
you to come in the office? All of those sorts of things can be worked out.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, that's so great. Have you seen, I know you said, the PAP is kind of that gold standard. Have you, in your experience, what kind of advancements have you seen, especially when it does come to preventative, but then also, okay, you do have a diagnosis. What are, what have been some of those advancements that you've seen over the course of time?
Yeah, probably the biggest advancement that we've seen recently with cervical cancer has been the vaccine,
Oh,
being
yeah.
able to prevent HPV. I mean, HPV is the main driver behind cervical cancer.
Right.
And so being able to protect people from that virus from the beginning is huge. And so being sure, if you're of that age where you should have that vaccination done, that's key. And then there have been, I work more in the hematology side of things.
Yeah.
And so I don't know too many specifics around the cervical side, but I think it's usually more of like a multidisciplinary approach where they
Mm-hmm.
can decide, is it something that we can surgically address? Is it something that needs more of a systemic approach like chemotherapy or immunotherapies? Sometimes there's something called brachytherapy, which is where they put some radiation kind of close to the sites of the cells.
Hmm.
So they have a lot of different ways that they can work with it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And yeah, definitely. Gosh, I remember when that HPV vax first came out. So yeah, no, for sure. I mean, really, the name of the game is prevention. 100%. What would you say? What are maybe some resources that you would recommend for those who want to learn more about either preventative care or really just where to start when it comes to, just their own, women's health?
Yes. So, the American Cancer Society is a great place to look to for guidelines,
Mm,
standard guidelines, and you can kind of look to see like what your age is and family history, and that'll kind of give you a rough idea of what things, you should be doing from a preventative perspective.
yeah.
And then I think also having a PCP is
Yeah.
also really helpful as well too.
Yes, not
Um,
just your
our
OB.
OB great, but they also aren't internal medicine. And so, just thinking to, just, about your overall health, is also going to help you. It was one of the things, that I thought about when we were going through kind of the IVF journey is, the healthier I am and my body is, the healthier and hopefully better this whole journey is gonna be for us.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Is there any advice that you would want to give as either a healthcare professional or mom via egg donation to anyone who is thinking about this journey, coming from it from a place of, having a diagnosis? Just what advice would you give?
Keep an open mind. I think
Mm,
it's something that in some ways can be very technical
mm,
and kind of hard to wrap your head around. And sometimes we think we are on a certain path or have a certain approach to something. And then
yeah,
as we learn more about the process, we have to change things up a little bit. I can give an example that when we first started our search for an egg donor, I was very much focused on someone who had physical attributes that were very similar to me.
sure.
And as we got more into it, I realized that well, that's, of course, a piece of it, but then maybe how many times somebody has donated so they have that skill set of like how to take all of the medications
Sure.
or. Did they have a successful donation and how many eggs they got? Once I started learning about all of these things, my kind of list of priorities of things in my head that I was looking at with egg donors changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I would just say, as you learn more about the process, be open to kind of making some adjustments. Um, I think the other example is when we were trying to decide some of the embryos to implant, and you get these grades, like almost kind of like you would grade a diamond, like they
Sure.
have all these things. And again, it was like very technical, getting in the weeds. I remember like staring at this report and so I like reached out to the fertility team and they were like, we're just gonna have you talk with the embryologist.
Yeah,
And it was so great. And once I talked to them, I realized like I was splitting hairs at that point. Like
sure.
in the weeds on it, and just to hear that from somebody who that's their area of expertise. She basically was like, what do you want, and whatever you want, whatever you pick, it's going to be great. And that
Yeah.
also really helped to like set me at ease. So, if you have these types of questions, just feel free to ask, like talk to the experts. Don't feel like it always has to be you doing more and more and more research on Google, because sometimes that just gets way too much.
Yeah.
And just go back to your team and just kind of talk it through with them. And sometimes they can help to kind of steer you in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I feel like I say it ad nauseum on here, but I mean, that building that team is so important. And that, I mean, that is your team. Those are your trusted advisors. Those are the experts in, whichever field they are in, and relying on them and trusting in them is just, gosh, that's half the battle. But yeah, why go to Dr. Google when you've built this team?
Exactly. Exactly. But it's so hard when it's like 3 a.m. and Dr. Google is right there in your
Right
hand, right?
there.
So put that down as much as you can.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Well, so Scott may have given you the heads up, but I have my one last question for you. For
Okay.
anyone who knows me, and I know you've seen me, sipping on my coffee this whole time, but coffee and I, we have a very close and definitely codependent relationship on each other. And so I always like to ask the question, what filled your cup today? Literally or figuratively, what was the thing that filled your cup?
Ah, so literally, cup of coffee this morning. We
Yes.
love Phil's coffee from when we lived in
Yes.
California. We have that. We have like a little subscription service,
I
and
love it.
I love my Phil's coffee in the morning. Uh,
Yes.
and then what was actually great, figuratively today, is I got to go in to my son's elementary school and read some books with some of his class today. He's in
Mm.
and that was just the best to get to read with him and then to read with some of his friends in school.
Oh, I love that. It's fun to be the special surprise guest.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Well, Erin, I really just thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your vulnerability and sharing your story. I mean, both you and Scott, just I know you guys are doing so much beyond just what you do day to day and, just with your family. And we are just so grateful for you. And I'm so grateful for you and just being able to lend your expertise and share everything for our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. We're happy to do this and share the story. So thanks again.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Me, You, and Who. We appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed our discussion today. As we wrap, we would like to remind you of some of the ways that you can stay connected with us and be part of the Me, You, and Who podcast community. Firstly, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode and can stay up to date with our latest content. But that's not all. We also have an exciting YouTube channel where we share some bonus content, behind the scenes glimpses, and video versions of our episodes. Head over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button there as well. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when the new episodes go live. And for more exclusive updates, engaging discussions, and a chance to connect with fellow listeners. Be sure to follow us on our social media accounts. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Create a Happy Family. If you're interested in finding out more about creating a happy family, please visit us at www.createahappyfamily.com. Thank you again for being part of the Me, You, and Who community. Your support means the world to us. I can't wait for you to join us next time as we continue to share stories and journeys of creating happy families.